Hey guys, this week we're going to be talking about the top 10 people who survived the impossible. Number 10. Guzman Macmillan was a worker at the World Trade Center and was one of the few survivors of the September 11 attacks. Incredibly, she survived the brutal fall of 11 flights of stairs and the force of thousands of pounds of rubble. Her feet were pinned and her head was stuck between two pieces of concrete, which made it impossible for her to move. The only thing she could do was move her right hand. Out of all odds, she was found 27 hours later, barely in conscious state, by one of the search and rescue dogs. To this day, she is reminded of what a miracle it was to have been one of the sole survivors of the attacks. Number 9. Roy Sullivan was a Virginia Forest Ranger who had a very unlucky attraction to lightning. Over his 36-year career as a ranger, Sullivan was struck by lightning 7 times and had survived each strike. So amazing that the 7th strike put him in the Guinness World Record books for being the person struck the most times by lightning. But unfortunately, he ended up shooting himself because he couldn't bear the anxiety of getting hit by lightning. Number 8. Matt Souter was 19 when he was transported by his grandmother's mobile home through a tornado. Incredibly, the young man was able to survive the crash with only a few scrapped wounds. He told media that when the tornado ravaged the trailer, it started rattling apart, then the back and front doors came off their hinges, and that the walls, ceiling, and floor were moving just like jello. After being transported by the tornado, the boy eventually landed in a grass field and was later found dazed and bleeding. Fortunately, he was able to recover and live on to tell the story. Number 7. Anatole Gorski was a researcher at the Institution of High Energy Physics in Protovino. He worked on the Soviet particle accelerator. On July 13, 1978, Gorski was checking a malfunctioning piece of equipment when all of a sudden he accidentally leaned his head over the proton beam. It pierced Gorski's skull at about 300,000 rads a minute through parts of his face and bones and brain tissue. He was taken to a clinic where the doctors could observe the damage, but amazingly, Gorski survived with no damage to his intellectual capacity, by the exception of the loss of his hearing on his left ear and the faint ringing of a constant internal noise. Number 6. Railroad worker Truman Duncan fell off the front of a moving train car when he was swept underneath the rail and was cut in two. Despite losing both legs and a kidney, Duncan called the paramedics on his cell phone and amazingly survived a 45-minute wait. When the paramedics got there, there was little hope of survival, with only the top half of his body intact. Incredibly, he was able to survive and went through 23 surgeries before he could get back to normal. To this day, Truman is considered a living legend for his incredible strength and will. Number 5. On January 26, 1972, Novella Buttchek was on board a Yugoslavia airline when it exploded from an altitude of 33,000 feet due to a bomb in the cargo bay. It was planted by the Croatian separatist group. Amazingly, she survived the crash and was found flat on the tail of the plane at the crash site. She ended up with a fractured skull, 2 broken legs, and 3 broken vertebrae, one of which left her paralyzed from the waist down. But incredibly, she was able to walk again after spending months of operation at the hospital. She even got into the Guinness World Record books for surviving the longest fall without a parachute. Number 4. Erin Rustin was a canyoneer on a trip in Blue John Canyon. When to his demise, a boulder fell and pinned his right arm in a canyon crevice. He spent 5 days trying to get the boulder unjammed with only a pocket knife and some rope. On the 5th day, he had finally decided to cut his arm off with his dull knife. After an agonizing 5 hours, he had finally cut his arm free and fled to search for rescue. He was found by a couple, was brought to the nearest hospital to treat his severed arm. To this day, he admits that he probably would have died if he hadn't cut his arm off. Number 3. Carlos Rodriguez is a 20-year-old Miami citizen that lost large portions of his brain and skull in a crash while on drugs after flying through his car's windshield and landing headfirst on the road. To his luck, he was able to survive, but the doctors were forced to cut away large amounts of flesh and bone, causing him to have the deformity in his skull. People have nicknamed him names such as Mr. Halfhead for his irregular-shaped head. Number 2. On March 18, 1915, Winston Moguel was captured while fighting in the Mexican Revolution. Without trial, he was sentenced to be executed by the firing squad. Moguel was shot 9 times, including a final bullet through his head at close range by an officer to ensure death. To the amazement, Moguel somehow was able to survive from all 10 wounds and managed to escape without the Americans finding out. Winston went on to live a full life after his near-death execution. Number 1. Fred Silica is considered the luckiest, unluckiest man alive. He's been able to survive many fatal accidents numerous times. The first of his numerous near-death experiences was when he was on a train and it suddenly derailed into an ice river, killing 17 passengers. He managed to escape with a broken arm, minor scratches, and a bruise. A year later, he was on a plane when the plane had lost one of its doors, causing the plane to crash land. The accident killed 19 people, however, he landed on a haystack and woke up in a hospital with minor injuries. In 1968, he was traveling on a bus that crashed and plunged into a river. There was 4 people dead. Astonishingly, he managed to escape unarmed. In 1970, he was driving along when all of a sudden his car caught fire. He was fortunate again to have left the car before the fuel tank exploded. 3 years later, another of his cars caught fire, blowing flames through the air vents, but it only flamed his hair. In 1995, he was hit by a bus, again leaving nothing but a few injuries. The following year, while driving through a mountain road, he drove off a guardrail to escape an oncoming truck and landed on a tree to see his car explode 300 feet below. But out of all odds, in 2003, he won the $1 million Croatian lottery, turning him into the world's unluckiest man to the world's luckiest man. Thanks everybody for watching and keep eaching on. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos.